just heard from President Trump swearing in General Kelly. What do you make of General Kelly? Is he going to be a good chief of staff?
I like him. I've dealt with him before when, in previous positions and then as the Department of Homeland Security. So I hope that he'll do a good job there. We're at a point where we need some surety coming out of the White House.
There was a dramatic vote last week on health care. Is it over? Are you guys going to change and switch to tax reform, or still on health care?
Well, I think what is over is an attempt to do it just with Republican votes. I think we've reached the limits of what we can do with Republican votes on health care right now. So it's not going to end. We've got to fix it. In Arizona, 200,000 Arizonans will wake up this morning having paid the fine and still don't have health care. And so it's got to be fixed, but there are limits to what we can do just on a partisan basis.
And your colleague, Senator McCain, he's doing all right? Or
he's starting treatments today, right. And the whole country wishes him well.
Yeah, we all do. The book is called Conscience of a Conservative. In it, you talk a lot about Barry Goldwater. Right. You talk a lot about conservative principles. You talk a lot about trade. Why was trade so important? Because this current administration has a different model of trade policy than what many had thought the Republican Party stood for.
Right. I mentioned Barry Goldwater. This is an homage to Barry Goldwater. He, in his time, felt that there was a crisis in the Republican Party. I think that crisis is here again today, because I think we've strayed from a lot of conservative principles. One of those conservative principles we've strayed from is free trade. We are only 5% of the world's population, only 20% of the world's economic output. If we don't find new markets for our goods, we don't grow economically, not in the long term. And on trade, getting out of the TPP was a big mistake. That is important for economic reasons as well as geopolitical reasons. We want countries, particularly in Southeast Asia, to be in our trade orbit, not just China's trade orbit. And so I'm very concerned about where we go forward on trade. Obviously, NAFTA is very important to the state of Arizona.
We talk about NAFTA because in mid-August, these meetings are set to resume in terms of that. When you go into some of these towns, whether they're in Arizona, whether they're in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, a lot of these voters that I've interviewed, Senator, and you know this from talking to them yourselves, are deeply frustrated with NAFTA. What they see is a trade agreement that was unfair to them. How do you, as a conservative, make the case to them that these trade agreements, that open trade, will help them?
Right. I talk a lot about that in the book, in fact. It is always easier for a politician to point to a shuttered factory and say, that's because of free trade. Mexico took those jobs, or China took those jobs, when the answer is far more complex. We produce twice as much as we did in the 1980s with 1/3 fewer workers in terms of manufacturing. So it's automation, mechanization that has really been the culprit, productivity. Better allocation of capital. But in Arizona, I think Arizona understands the benefits of trade quite well. We're next door to Mexico. We have $15 billion in trade with Mexico every year. $8 million are spent by Mexican shoppers in Arizona every day. So it's something that's understood by Arizonans perhaps a little better because we're right on the border and see the benefits of international trade. But as a whole, our whole world order, if you want to put it that way, after World War II was based on the notion that we benefit as a country when other countries benefit. By helping them.
That doesn't seem what we're hearing from the administration.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because that is very much still the case. We've provided a security umbrella through international arrangements. We've provided, first off, concessionary trade policy to help these countries grow and develop, and now they are destinations, and now they buy our products. We're all better off. This is very much a case where a rising tide lifts all boats. Globalization has happened. There isn't an argument about that. It has happened. The question is, do we latch onto it? Do we take advantage of it? Or are we left behind by it? And every day that we aren't negotiating either bilateral or multilateral trade deals, we're falling behind.
Tax reform, something that a lot of folks feel like they are left behind on. Are you confident that by the end of the year there could be some type of tax reform? I
am. That's one area where I think the president's instincts are good. And the proposal that they put forward, it's pretty small, but lower the rates, broaden the base.
No border adjustment tax.
Yes, that gratefully I think is being left behind. Anything that would spark a trade war is not good for us.
Right.
But I do think that we've got to get tax reform, and the failure of health care reform has made that even more important.
Is it frustrating to be a senator right now and literally have a news cycle driven by the president's tweets?
Yes, it is.
Like, how do you help us sort through this? How does that even work?
When you wake up every morning, and well, most mornings, and there's a tweet, it's easy to say I'm just not going to respond at all, and I think that's probably the appropriate stance, to not respond to everything.
But you have to respond.
But sometimes you need to respond,
right.
and I would argue when the president talks about something that is simply not true. For example, that he won the popular vote, or things like that. That there are certain truths that are self-evident, and if we don't accept those, then we aren't honest with ourselves or with our constituents, and it matters, these things, and so you have to respond to some things. And when the president, when his demeanor or comportment and the things that he says aren't appropriate, I think we do bear a responsibility to stand up and speak out.
I've got to ask you this. I know it's a long way off, but do you think President Trump will face a conservative challenger in the 2020 cycle?
I have no idea, and that's not my concern. My concern is, as I talk about in the book, is returning the Republican Party to the principles that are timeless, that have animated the party for generations in a good way. Limited government, economic freedom, free trade, strong defense. If we stick to those things, we'll be far better off as a party in the long term.
Senator Jeff Flake, A Conscience of a Conservative is the book. I read it on the train up here. It's awesome. I hope everybody goes out and takes a look at it. Thanks for coming into Bloomberg.
Thanks for reading.
Appreciate it. Thanks.